Welcome to a new English Plus episode. This episode is all about vocabulary building, and as we usually do, we will learn 10 new words every time in context. And our context or story for today is about I Have a Dream, the famous speech by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You can practice what you learn in this episode on my website. There is a link in the description that will take you to the custom post I created for this episode. You will find a lot to learn on my website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com. And better yet, if you are a patron, you will get exclusive episodes, series, and resources to take your English and learning to the next level. You can find the links in the description of the episode. So remember, before you finish listening to this episode, check the episode notes or the description, and you will find all the links you need. And now, before we start, let me tell you about the 10 words we're going to learn in today's episode. We're going to learn the word abridge, galvanize, charismatic, indefatigable, frustration, creed, character, renowned, immeasurable, and eventually. So, you're interested? Of course you are. Join me in this episode and we will learn all about this. And now, without further ado, let's talk about I Have a Dream by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I Have a Dream, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The Constitution of the United States guarantees certain civil rights to all citizens of the United States. However, not long ago, these rights were often abridged by local or state laws. These laws created segregated schools and limited voting rights by requiring so-called literacy tests or imposing poll taxes designed to keep African Americans from voting. For decades, a number of civil rights groups fought these restrictions, but progress was painfully slow. It took the words and actions of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to renew and galvanize the movement. This articulate and charismatic African American minister inspired an entire nation that had grown impatient for change. Dr. King had for many years been an indefatigable worker for civil rights. His frequent nonviolent efforts on behalf of equality often landed him in jail. On August the 28th, 1963, King spoke to the more than 250,000 people assembled in the nation's capital and to millions of Americans on live television. This remarkable speech gave the civil rights movement new strength. And now let's listen to some quotes or parts from this historic speech. I say to you today, my friends, that in spite of all the difficulties and frustrations of the moment, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. When we let freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Delivered before the Lincoln Memorial, these words are among the most renowned and often quoted in American history. They had an immediate and immeasurable impact upon the nation and upon the civil rights movement in the years that followed. A series of civil rights acts were eventually passed, and the long road to Dr. King's dream became a little shorter. So, that was our story, and this speech in particular is so inspiring, and it is so needed even today. I mean, yes, of course, we can argue that we have come a long way since then, but we still need a lot more to achieve equality between all races, all genders, all people around the world, because we are all created the same, whether we like it or not. But now, let's get back to what we're here for, vocabulary building. We want to build our vocabulary, right? And we want to learn 10 new words in the context of our story for today, I Have a Dream by Dr. Martin Luther King. But before we start, let me remind you of these words again. These words are abridge, galvanize, charismatic, indefatigable, frustration, creed, character, renown, immeasurable, and eventually. So, are you ready to learn the meaning of these words? We'll do that just after a short break. Stay tuned, don't go away. Are you serious about your vocabulary building? If you really want to take your vocabulary to the next level and make 2022 the year when you build a huge active vocabulary bank, I have just the thing you need. I have created 2 vocabulary building book series. The first book series is Crossword Puzzle Vocabulary Building, and the second is Word Search Games and Activities, with carefully designed activities that will make sure you remember the new words you learn in context, with 10 books in each series and with more than 1,000 new words in each book. Your active vocabulary will get much better this year. The books are available on Amazon. You can find the links in the description. But if you want to see a sample of the books first, there is another link where you can see for yourself and know for sure that these books are the ones you really need to improve your vocabulary before you buy them on Amazon. Build your English vocabulary in 2022 and never be lost for words anymore with English Plus Vocabulary Building book series. So, let's talk about the very first word, abridge. abridge. How did we use that word in context? We said, however, not long ago, these rights were often abridged by local or state laws when we were talking about, of course, civil rights. So, when we talk about the word abridge, which is usually used in passive voice like abridged, the word abridge usually means to reduce the length of a written work by condensing or rewriting. But in this context, it means to deprive people of privileges or rights, because here we're talking about rights that were often abridged. We're not talking about a book, right? So we're talking about depriving people of privileges or rights. But remember that this word is often used to talk about reducing the length of a written work. Okay? But here we used it in a completely different context. Now for our next word, galvanize. 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 How did we use that in context? We said it took the words and actions of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to renew and galvanize the movement. Now, what does that mean? To galvanize someone means to cause them to take action. For example, by making them feel very excited, afraid, or angry. So again, the words and actions of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were very useful to galvanize the movement, to stimulate it, to inspire it, to give it newfound strength. So that is the meaning of galvanize. What about the next word, charismatic? How do we spell this word? First, it's a long word. It's charismatic. Charismatic. And we used it, of course, to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King. We said this articulate and charismatic African-American minister inspired an entire generation that had grown impatient for change. Now, when we talk about a charismatic person, we're talking about a person who attracts, influences, and inspires people by their personal qualities. A charming person, an appealing person, an influential person. A very strong character, a very good role model. And here we're not just talking about the words. Remember, if you want to be charismatic, it has to be both your words and actions, just like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So that was our word, charismatic. And now for our next word, which is also a long word, indefatigable. It is indefatigable. Indefatigable. Now, here we're talking about fatigue. The word is fatigue. But when you are indefatigable, what does that mean? But first, let's see how we used it in context. We said Dr. King had for many years been an indefatigable worker for civil rights. So what do we mean by that? We use indefatigable to describe someone who never gets tired of doing something. It's like tireless, dogged, persevering, and patient at the same time because you never get tired of doing things, especially if you're doing the right thing. So that is the meaning of indefatigable. Nothing can stop this person. And that is a very good word that can be used to describe how Dr. King was an indefatigable worker for civil rights. And now for our next word, frustration. 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 How did we use that word in context? Here, we took something from the speech itself. I say to you today, my friends, that in spite of the difficulties and frustrations of the moment, I still have a dream. So, when we talk about frustration, what is it? It is a feeling, of course, but it is a bad feeling. Frustration is the feeling of being annoyed, upset, or impatient because you cannot control or change a situation or achieve something. It causes great dissatisfaction, irritation, and resentment because of this feeling that you cannot control your situation. You cannot change it. And that is frustration, my friends. And now for our next word, creed. C-R-E-E-D. How did we use that word in context? We're still quoting from this great speech. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. What is the meaning of creed? Now, you might have heard this word from Assassin's Creed or Apollo Creed, and now the franchise goes on, Creed 1, 2, and maybe 3 soon. But what is the meaning of the word creed? A creed is a set of beliefs, principles, or opinions that strongly influence the way people live or work. It's like doctrine, faith, or ideology. That's the meaning of creed. Now for our next word, character. C-H-A-R-A-C-T-E-R. Character. Let's see how we use this word in context. And this word comes from my favorite part of the speech, of Dr. King's speech, I Have a Dream. He said, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Well, the character of a person or place consists of all the qualities they have that make them distinct from other people or places. It's simply like personality or nature. So that is the word character. And now for our next word, we still have 3. Don't go away. The next word is renown. R-E-N-O-W-N. Renown. How did we use that in context? Now, we said delivered before the Lincoln Memorial. These words are among the most renowned and often quoted in American history. Now, a person of renown is well known, usually because they do or have done something good. So renown is the same like fame, note, distinction, or repute. And here, when we say that something or someone is renowned, especially a person, we're talking about something that is usually a good thing, a good person, or somebody who has done good things. So that is the meaning of the word renown. Now for our next word, immeasurable. I-M-M-E-A-S-U-R-A-B-L-E. Immeasurable. Now, how did we use this word in context? We said they had an immediate and immeasurable impact upon the nation and upon the civil rights movement in the years that followed. Now, of course, we were talking about this famous speech and Dr. King's actions and other speeches, of course. But what is the meaning of immeasurable? Here we talked about immeasurable impact upon the nation and upon the civil rights movement. Now, if you describe something as immeasurable, you're emphasizing how great it is, how big it is, how vast, immense, incalculable, endless, immeasurable. That is the word, okay? Now for our very last word for this episode, and this one is eventually. What does it mean? But first, let's spell it. Let's see how we used it in context, and then I will tell you about the meaning. So the spelling comes first. E-V-E-N-T-U-A-L-L-Y. Eventually. Now, we used it in context. We said a series of civil rights acts were eventually passed, and the long road to Dr. King's dream become a little shorter. So here, what do we mean by eventually? Now, eventually means in the end, especially after a lot of delays, problems, or arguments. It's like saying finally, ultimately, or sometimes sooner or later. So that is our word, eventually, and this is the last word we have in today's episode. Did you like the 10 words? Did you like the story I shared with you in today's episode? Well, that's great. So then you can go on and review the podcast and help other people find this podcast, whether you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts or you're listening to it on Spotify or any other listening platform. Take some time to leave an honest review and give this podcast the rating it deserves, because that will help me reach more people. And if you like what you've learned today, why don't you help other people find this podcast? You can also share it with other people if you want on social media or any other platform you have. I'll appreciate it a lot. So that was everything I wanted to share with you in this English Plus episode. Don't forget to visit my website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com, and check the great learning opportunities you can find there. There is the Activity Center with daily fun activities, quizzes, and logic and math puzzles. And if you decide to become a patron on Patreon, there is a lot more available only to patrons, like the exclusive audio series, among many other benefits you get when you become a patron. All the links you need are in the description of the episode. What are you waiting for? Take your English and learning to the next level and never stop learning with EnglishPlusPodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. This is your host, Danny. I will see you next time.